Hi, this is Park Sam. Welcome to this episode of the Living and Working Abroad show. We're back in the Cyprus office this week, looking over the horizon at future events and how they change in the week ahead. Many tumultuous changes going on at the moment, and we're looking how those can affect people living and working abroad, or people that are considering living and working abroad in the near future. Which might mean leaving the UK if there's anybody left, um, because, well, let's have a look at that. First of all, let's have a look at what some of the ideas that have been coming up this week. We've seen that democracies always swing to the centre. What do we mean by that? Is if you get a left wing or right wing government in a democracy, at some point the democratic vote tends to swing back to the middle. So what we had is a default Labour government elected in the UK a year ago as a protest vote against the previous incumbent government of the previous 10 years, who proved they were equally as incompetent as the 10 years before that. And what turned out is that now this new Labour government that came in on a far left agenda to increase taxes and regulation and oppression of people and free speech. And now that's beginning to come undone. And so we see that despite a massive majority, they can't get their way to do everything that they wish. So within the Labour Party, we see their far left reacting to the far left government, the people that's further left than those, they're reacting, threatening a breakaway. And we also see that a government's radical proposals to cut government spending were challenged to the extent that they were going to lose the majority. And the majority that supposedly was 140, 150 is cut down to 30 or 40. So democratic swings will bring everything back to the centre at some point. And in the meanwhile, we have to look at what the good the government could do and what bad damage they could do over the next years in the UK. And my personal belief is that the reason we saw the UK Chancellor, the new UK Iron Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, crying in the Commons behind her so-called leader, two-tier, I believe that the reason she was crying is that she's made all these verbal commitments to say, I'm going to follow these financial rules. I'm going to keep spending within my limits. Okay, I'm still going to borrow more money than anybody's ever borrowed before on the behalf of British taxpayers to spend, but I am going to follow my rules. And all the additional spending and additional taxes that she's raised to stay within her financial guidelines, her fiscal rules, have all been shot away by spending promises and cuts that have been reversed by the definition of a leader. And what she knew last week when she was sobbing in the Commons is that she's going to be a scapegoat for that when she's standing up at a budget in the autumn in the UK or next April telling you this is how we're going to put up your taxes on your pension funds, on inheritance, on capital gains, on income tax, and anything else. And there's lots of things to look at that. And that's what we're looking at today. If you're thinking about relocation and living and working abroad, contact us at proactpartnership.com. We can give you help and guidance on places to relocate overseas or operate your business from to protect your capital while abroad. The EU is close by the UK, but of course it's a separate trading bloc, so it's not the easiest thing to work. Although a British person can't necessarily work in the EU, what they can do is that they can work remotely for a UK contract or a UK employer. The UK is in a reciprocal social insurance agreement with the EU, as well as countries like USA and Canada, the Philippines, Turkey, and many other countries around the world. Bermuda sounds good, but the point being is that if you've got a remote contract and your employer agrees that you can work abroad, either as an employee or as a contractor, it's possible to set that up and arrange it. And we can do that. And if you and your employer need help and guidance on setting up that remote working contract so that you can work in EU, work in Cyprus, work in Spain or France, but for a UK contract as an employer or an employee, contact us at projectpartnership.com to find out how to know how. Coming up at the end of the year, Cyprus is hoping to join the Schengen zone. A couple of things are going in its way. A, it's passed all the tests that the EU want for it to be able to join the Schengen zone. Every other country in the EU, apart from Ireland, is in the Schengen zone. And effectively what it means is proper freedom of movement within that area. However, on a negative side, in 2025, it means that the UK has the Cyprus has continued to adapt its rules to fit in with EU Schengen zone rules. For one, the one common market. So just have it in mind in that whatever you expected to be able to get in the EU Schengen zone in Cyprus in particular a few years ago, there might be a slightly different treatment of a British national going forward, not just for access on short holidays and business, but also for residency permits as well. So if you've got a plan to work remotely, if you've got a plan to get a job abroad, if you've got a plan to live and work abroad, you need to consider what the EU rules are going to be in Cyprus or your jurisdiction where you're going to live and pay less tax. And you can, if you want to find out more, you can contact us at projectpartnership.com. There's a few reasons why you might choose to come to Cyprus, and I'm going to go into those at the end, because one of those is about the creep in England. And I'm not talking about Keir Starmer, I'm talking about the tax creep in the UK. Two-tier Key has U-turned so many times that he's now effectively on his knees. We see somebody who's got the title of leader, but in effect he's working from a PR playbook, and having been elected by default, he's now taken the country through the Halloween budget into decline, where we've got rising unemployment and falling growth and rising prices around the world. On contrast, we see in the USA that despite everything and all the bombastic changes that are being introduced, the UK stock market, UK economy, despite all Trump's bombastic statements, tariff threats, and challenges on international trade, in the USA, the stock market is booming, the USA job market is booming, the USA inflation rate is down, and the USA prospects are looking stronger and stronger all the time. Not by putting up taxes like the UK did, not by restricting the ability of an entrepreneur to generate wealth for the economy, but by creating a tax agenda which frees up people to spend and grow. Two of my favourite things in the Trump bill is that under their new law, if a worker works overtime, he doesn't pay tax on that overtime. What's the benefit of that to the economy? They work harder, they do more. Isn't that a good thing for the economy as a whole, for everybody as a whole? Another thing that they're doing is, in addition to tax-free overtime, it's also tax-free tips. So instead of somebody doing a great job as a taxi driver, a host or service or whatever, to earn a tip and then having to declare that and get the miserable taxman to come and take his 20%, now tips are free in America. So if somebody delivers good service to a customer, they get rewarded straight away. It creates an entrepreneurial free enterprise uh, uh, environment where people are enthusiastic and people can invest and grow in the economy and everybody gets wealthy. The problem with the UK's approach, tax and spend, is that if you tax to spend and employ people, all you're doing is adding a layer of cost and stifling that innovation in planning and bureaucracy. It doesn't work. So, what can a government that's committed to tax and spend, to investing in the economy, not just to build a new road or a new bridge to nowhere, but to either get the economy going? If that is really the way to do it, and not to cut taxes and let enterprise take over, then your government has to increase taxes. And we've got two worrying developments over the last week. First of all, we got the about turn and the reversal of the UK government that they're going to now start to increase the spending. They're not going to reduce spending anymore. They've cut, all the proposed cuts have gone. Therefore, there's going to be a higher level of public spending than anticipated. So where are they going to pay for that? Okay. Now, there's lots of potential taxes that could be drawn in. We've already seen basic capital gains tax go up by 80% in the Halloween budget, from 10 to 18%. But why not align capital gains tax to income taxes? So if you make any capital gain taxable as an income, or you just make the income tax at the same rate, or if you said you get a 5,000 gain, you add it onto your income tax, that could create an interesting scenario. So at the moment, capital gains tax is 18 or 24%. But if your 5,000 gain on crypto or property or business was income, you could put it onto your income tax to pay 20 or 40 or 45%. So that'd be an interesting way forward for a tax creep to progress and tax capital gains even more. If you did make a capital gain taxable on income tax rates, not only is it going to be taxed at a higher rate, but you can then remove completely the capital gains personal allowance. It was 12,000 a few years ago, but the tax group has seen that eroded right down to a few thousand now. So we could get a tax creep on capital gains coming in. Another area is inheritance tax. We already know that inheritance tax will be added to pension funds. So this means that when you've got your personal allowance for inheritance tax of 325, which has not been increased for 10 years, that could easily be taken up by a pension fund now. A £20,000 pension is more than a £400,000 pension pot. So that's going to cover in an inheritance your nil rate band allowance. So that's another way that inheritance tax could be increased. You could see the slimy playbook approach of tax creep. They say, well, let's simplify the tax system. So instead of having a higher tax rate and an additional tax rate, what you could do is just say, let's just have one higher tax rate, but that would then end up being 45 and not 40. So that would be another good way of adding an extra 5% to anybody earning over £50,000 a year. Don't forget the tax bands in the UK have been frozen now for over 10 years. And so a lot of people are creeping into 40% tax, 45% tax. You could accelerate that, meaning that everybody over £50,000 income in a year could be getting a 45% tax rate. You've not put tax rates up. at 45%. They're already at 45%. You just change the bands. So you PR playbook that to say that I've reduced the threshold, or I've simplified the tax system, but actually it ends up people paying more tax. The personal allowance has been frozen for years. That's not going to change. Might be abolished. Who knows? Inheritance tax, personal allowance hasn't been changed. Again, it could be abolished. There's a very generous rule on first death. It's not charged to the spouse, but could actually start charging inheritance tax on first death, even for married couples. That would be a way forward for them. And extend it across a broader sweep. But again, if we could add all capital gains to add up to an income tax, so that capital gains is not 18 and 24, but it's potentially 20, 40, 45, and you including pension funds as well. It's a big leap forward for taxpayers. So all those are options that the UK government have got to plug the gaps that they've got. And they've got a very, very, very important international supporter for them, for this work. In the last week, tragically, the highly accountable UN, United Nations, has released a report saying it needs to promote fairness throughout the world. It needs to promote opportunity and health programs around the world. And there needs to be a standard approach to everything. So in effect, the UN is endorsing additional taxes and a wealth tax for people around the world. Now, wealth taxes per se fail generally when they're introduced, but what we can see over the last couple of years is a steady progression of taxes, which are all in fact wealth taxes that are being introduced by another way. So in Portugal, they call it a solidarity tax. They call it a wealth tax in 2 or 3 countries in Europe, but not many. But it could be a non-dom tax, or it could be, they could actually call it a wealth tax. They could call it a wealth tax on the very rich, or they could call it, just a separate excise duty to pay for the NHS, to pay for as a wealth tax. So the type of wealth taxes that could potentially be introduced could be 1% taxes. It could be on everything. That would be the simplest way. So the solidarity tax in Portugal charges 1% on worldwide income and gains. So again, blurring the lines between taxing income and gains separately. So we tax them all together, potentially a higher rate of income tax, plus why not put on a wealth tax as well? You could just make it an extra 1% tax on your worldwide income and gains. That way works, and then you attribute that to a special funding need that the government would want. So the market's moving towards that. The publicity is beginning to come out already. People talking in favour of those health taxes and where they're coming and how they're going to affect people. So taxes in a left-wing, far left-wing social democracy like the UK under Labour, taxes can only go up because taxes will stifle innovation, increase in borrowing. UK is already at record highs of borrowing. It's only going to get worse. If you do reconsider and consider relocating abroad, contact us at proactpartnership.com. Why would you consider living and working abroad in Cyprus? Well, there's more good news on the horizon. So Cyprus, it tends to be very tax friendly for expats. And just to reinforce that, while everybody else is introducing their wealth taxes and finding new ways to tax people, Cyprus is trying to align and comply with international tax rules to a better standard. And the outcome of that in 2026 is currently projected and going through a legal process of parliamentary approval for a much lower tax regime. So an expat could get a 0% tax on dividends for 15 years, but it also, under the new regime, the maximum dividend tax rate can be 5%. And this compares to over 8% in the UK and, and up to 39%. So just think about that. If you're paying yourself on dividends, you could pay 39% in the UK as opposed to 45% income tax. But if you were working from the UK, from Cyprus to manage your business, you could pay a maximum of 5%. Corporation tax in Cyprus is generally the lowest in the EU, but the minimum international standards that governments are pressing for with their international global tax standards is 15%. So Cyprus are going to increase the corporation tax rate to 15%. Still effectively as cheap as you can get anywhere. When the UK reacted to the international calls for a standard minimum corporation tax rate, they put the corporation tax rate up from 19 to 25%. In Cyprus, they've gone the other way and kept it to the bare minimum. It's been 12.5% for 20 plus years, and it's not going to go up or go anywhere quickly. So 15% is the minimum allowed under an international tax status, and that will suffice well. If you want to consider working remotely from Cyprus, or that you want to have Cyprus as your tax base where you're living and working abroad around the world, or you want Cyprus as a holding company for your family trust or your family business or your family property, then it can be a very, very tax efficient location. And for more information and guidance on that, you can contact us at proactpartnership.com. Cyprus, like many other countries, has a bit of an issue with economic migrants. The asylum seeker laws are post-Second World War, very valid, but they're being abused with a world's population of 50% of the people younger than 30. And how do they feed and grow and meet their aspirations for their lifetime in the rest of the 21st century? Hence, we've got economic migration. They don't qualify on the rules to relocate abroad, but what they do qualify for is asylum seeker if they're fleeing persecution or war zones. Now, Gaza is a war zone. You could argue that Tehran's city centre or nuclear sites are a war zone at the moment, but other countries aren't necessarily. So the system is being abused, and it's something that we need to be aware of, and find governments to find a response. What Cyprus's response is to change the criteria for getting citizenship and long-term stays in Cyprus. So while under the Schengen zone rules, Cyprus has to be able to allow freedom of movement for EU nationals. Under what it can do as well, it's also protect its borders, and this is what it's done. So like the UK, Cyprus had a 5-year rule. Under 5 years, international standards, there's a minimum to get a permanent residency agreement. They call it indefinite leave to remain in the UK. Now, if you can get that indefinite leave to remain, great, because you don't need to worry about checking up and doing this and doing that. However, the permanent residency rules in Cyprus now are radically changing. So a permanent resident has citizens' rights. They don't get to vote, but they have effectively citizens' rights. So they can live, work, marry, have children, and grow their world in Cyprus. Two big changes that come along. A, you need an exam qualification, and B, you need to have a permanent residency now for 8 years before you become a citizen. So previously in Cyprus, you needed to have be a resident for 7 years, Now you need to be a resident for at least 5, a permanent resident for at least 8. That's 13 years, as long as Spain, before you can get a citizenship in Cyprus, with some quite high Greek-speaking language regulations. And it's quite interesting on that. Cyprus' official languages are Greek and Turkish. To join the EU, Cyprus has to either settle with the north and Turkey to have one country system after their breakup in 1974, or they need to put a hard border across the island. Neither of those is very palatable to Cypriots, but it's a potential solution that could actually come now. And obviously, introducing laws where you're requiring people to have Greek language to get permanent residency, or Greek language to get a citizenship, is a clear indication of a two-state solution being potentially the way forward for Cyprus, and potentially allowing Cyprus to join the Schengen zone in December 25. The final reason for that would be that Cyprus is the EU president of the Council of Ministers from December 25 through 2026. There will be a shining moment for them to achieve the long-held ambition to be seen as an equal member of the EU and to meet the Schengen zone rules requirements. So we've covered a broad range. We said there's lots of tax creep going on in the UK, where new taxes are being introduced or potentially introduced to the detriment of the future of the country, creating more taxable income for the government to spend, but that's not as efficient as the economy spending it themselves on their own entrepreneurial, sole trading and business incomes. We've seen the tax creep continued with this government doing two-tier turns to go back on itself all the time on what it's trying to do. So it's not producing a radical cash flow to grow business, to restrain business, or anything else in the middle. So the tax review is going to continue, and the lobbying and the freedom of rights to demonstrate is going to continue under the current government. We need to wait and see where it is. But if you feel that you might be in a position where your business or your family or your property is going to be compromised by the changes that are coming ahead, you can contact us at ProactPartnership.com, and we'll offer you a free review and advice and guidance on your circumstances, which just trying to show you how much you're going to save and how much better off you'll be. Okay, so thanks a lot for listening. I hope you've enjoyed it. If you did, leave a comment or message. If you've got any questions or want any guidance or a free review call, you can contact us at ProactPartnership.com. So go to that website and fill out an online inquiry form, or give us a call direct. Thanks a lot for listening, and we'll see you next time.